from St. Paul Catholic Center at IU. Go Hoosiers. Although I did spend a year at Purdue, so I do have love for the Boilermakers, so I'm a little impartial. So the talk tonight, Ali asked me, what is something that you're really familiar with? What do you know really well? And for some of you, it's Lord of the Rings or the Silmarillion. For some people, it's C.S. Lewis. And for me, actually, the thing I'm most familiar with is awkwardness. And so I thought, hey, that would be a good topic, talking about awkwardness and the awkwardness of being Catholic. And I thought that would be a great talk to give because I'm very familiar with it. I've been awkward my entire life, and I'm proud of it. But and in fact, I'm 30 now, and so I've had about 30 years to grow in my awkwardness as a Catholic. I remember when I was a kid growing up in middle school, one of my friends, whenever they would have a sleepover on Saturday night, I could go, but I would have to go to Mass the next day. And so at 7:30, my parents would pick me up and we'd go to Mass, and then I'd come back and they'd drop me off at my friend's house, and I would have to spend my friends were probably still asleep, so I would just spend the morning with my friends' parents, drinking coffee with them. That could be why I'm actually best friends with all my friends' parents. And then even as I was in high school, I was really awkward too. I remember my dad, he was kind of the one that really kind of pushed us in our faith. And we had to go to confession every 3 months. It was you had to go to the doctor, you had to go to the dentist, you had to go to the priest for confession. And in my home parish in Colorado, the only night where they had confessions was Friday night, which was the same night that I had my Taekwondo classes. And so my dad, every 3 months, he dragged me into to church for confession, and I was wearing my Taekwondo uniform, with the Kung Fu bandana. And actually, I think it kind of worked in my favor because the priest probably got intimidated by me and gave me really light penances. So maybe that's not an awkward thing at all. But and even here I am today in a bar talking to you about being awkward and being Catholic, and so it's a very, I think, a special thing. And as I was preparing for this talk, I thought, what if I'm the only awkward one? What if I'm the only awkward Catholic? And so I did a little research, and I asked my friends on Facebook to share some of their awkward moments to see if it was true that they also were awkward. And so, if you don't mind, I'm just going to read a lot of the responses because they were pretty remarkable. And they kind of prove that I'm not alone in this. And so, one of the first comments came from a friend, and she said that at work they had a mission statement they were reading in front of a big meeting. And at the end of the mission statement, at the end of the statement, she declared amen. So, actually, that might work at work, actually. Jason, you should try it.
I'll try it sometime.
Another friend said that she went to a Democratic caucus meeting, and she proposed that they have a pro-life agenda for their caucus. And that was the most awkward moment in her life as a Catholic. This one comes from a Dominican. He's actually at Purdue now, Father Cashin. And he said that one of our Dominican brothers, that he walked into our house in St. Louis into the TV room, and he genuflexed to the TV before he sat down. And he did that because he had just spent time in the Blessed Sacrament, adoring the Lord. And then, once you go to the TV room, it's pretty similar to being in a sacrament chapel. Someone said that when someone says, "May the force be with you," they respond, "And with your spirit." Now, I don't know, do you guys get asked that question a lot? May the force be with you? Or it's not a question.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a natural, what else do you say other than "and with your spirit"? This actually comes from Connor, this next one. And do you want to say it, Connor?
I don't remember what it is.
You said that sometimes when you're meeting new people in public, when you shake their hand, you say, "And peace be with you."
That's happened.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. I'm going to start doing that from now on. Every time I meet someone new, I'll just say, "Peace be with you." I go through the drive-thru to order food, and then when they say hello, I'll say, "Peace be with you." And then they probably won't respond with your spirit. One of my friends, she said that every time she goes to see a doctor, she often says "Father." So she calls the doctor Father. So, bless me, Father. It's been 6 months since my last examination. Here's a good one. This one I think is one we've all related to. And she said, one of my friends said that when one of her Protestant friends made plans for them to both have dinner at an awesome steakhouse, they chose to do it on a Friday during Lent. And she had to awkwardly explain to her friends that she couldn't eat steak on Friday. I think I've experienced that too. One of my friends said that one time in elementary school, she was praying silently before eating. She closed her eyes to pray. And while she was praying, one of her friends said, "Why are you sleeping?" And she said, "Well, I'm praying." And her friend's like, "That's weird. You don't close your eyes when you pray." I don't know, I pray all the time with my eyes closed. And then here's one that comes from the great high holy days of awkwardness for Catholics, and that's on Ash Wednesday. One of my friends wrote that on Ash Wednesday, this last Ash Wednesday, that after she received her ashes on her forehead, she was walking, and people kept telling her that she had dirt on her face, and they even were trying to take the dirt off. Like people would say, "Oh, you got something here," and she had to explain to them, "No, it's not dirt. I'm Catholic." And then one of my friends also said that she went to a piano recital, and she genuflected as she was going to the piano recital, which, is kind of remarkable, because if people saw her and then they saw her genuflecting, they might think, who's playing the piano recital? Is it Jesus that's playing today? Probably not. Here are some of my favorite ones. One of my friends said that one time he went to a church and he was dipping to put his hands in the holy water, but he missed. And he kind of hit the wall instead, and he just kind of continued walking like nothing had happened. So it was just, he just still pretended to be cool, because what else do you do? One of my friends said that his favorite awkward moment is when he's at Mass, actually, and he forgets the responsorial psalm, and he ends up just muttering some nonsensical thing like, "Doug eats sprouts of joy." Actually, is that in the Bible? Doug eats sprouts of joy? Probably not. Well, here's one of my favorite ones. And one of my friends said that his most favorite awkward moment is when he's the odd one out during the sign of peace. You know how it goes, like you're with two friends, and during the sign of peace, they give peace to each other first, and you're just left by yourself. And you might turn to the next person, but no, they're busy too. And so it's just like you're just in this awkward circle of not having anyone shake your hand. Here's another one during Mass. One of my friends said the most awkward moment is during Mass, when it's the time for the sign of peace, and you go for the handshake and they go for the hug. That one is painful. I mean, especially, you young single people, if you invite someone you like to Mass, and during the sign of peace, it's kind of like, do I care about them enough to hug them, or just a handshake? And it's almost like, do they like me enough to hug me, or is it just going to be a handshake? It's like playing rock, paper, scissors, but you're using the people's feelings instead of rock, paper, scissors. This next one is good. It's when you're in line to receive communion, and especially from the chalice, and right before you get up there, they run out. That's a very awkward moment. It's almost like the person just puts the purificator on the chalice and shakes their head, and you walk away. And then the last one's actually my favorite. And this one actually doesn't happen to me too much anymore, because I'm a priest. Actually, when you become a priest, you no longer are awkward, because it's just the grace of God that saves you. But she said her most awkward moment is when she goes up to receive communion, and then she forgets which pew she's sitting in. So she just ends up sitting in someone else's pew. Now that one's pretty fun, because it's like you're kneeling there, kind of trying to pray after receiving communion, and you look down and you just say "That's not my purse." I'm a guy, I don't know a purse. Now these are just some of the examples of awkwardness. Maybe some of you have experienced these, maybe not. Maybe you're not as awkward as I am. But I think when I look at this list of these awkward moments, I actually think that they're pretty cool. I think that they're actually awesome, these awkward moments that we have as Catholics. And I think there's even, I kind of named it, I have 3 reasons why I think these are secretly awesome moments. And the first reason why I think these are secretly awesome is because I think these are experiences where we live our faith on our sleeves. We're not, we can't hide it. We can't hide the awkwardness. It's like a part of us. And as Catholics, we are a part of this Catholic community. We have this community that we belong to. And I don't know, for you converts like Scotty, when you first become Catholic, there's a lot of things you have to learn. There's a lot of little prayers you have to learn. You have to learn how to do the sign of the cross correctly. You have to learn what to say and do and stuff like that. And I think that these are actually great moments that prove that we're in this community together. That when you are a part of a community, it changes you. That it even grows on you. That it changes who you are. And it kind of changes the way you act around other people as well. And I think it's even great when we accidentally, quote the scriptures, or we accidentally quote Mass, or we accidentally do something that's really awkward, but it's something that we Catholics all understand. It's like a hidden language. It's like a secret handshake we all have. And this Catholic culture that we can develop is something that I think is akin to what we do when we grow in virtue. Because virtue is something that it comes through grace, but it also comes through us acting out in our faith. It becomes from doing something over and over again, that it becomes like a habit. And this is a process by which we are, I think, changed by what we believe. That what we believe actually affects the way we behave, the way we talk around other people. And even having these awkward moments help us to, in one sense, it's like our second nature. It's like who we are. We can't not do that things because we're Catholic. And the second reason why I think this is secretly, or not the second reason, but I think part of this first reason, I have bullet points, so I need to follow. But part of the reason why I think it's also great is that we look at St. Paul, and he's a man that, in one sense, knew the importance of not being intimidated by awkward circumstances. That for him, it was a real struggle, and that he had to, in one sense, live out his faith in a very non-faith comfortable world. That's where St. Paul, he says that he doesn't concern himself with the way people think. He doesn't concern himself with the opinions of the world, but instead he considers most important the opinion of God in his life, the opinion that God has for him. And so for that reason, he's willing to embarrass himself. He's willing to put himself out there. He's willing to even kind of throw himself under the bus, because it's not about him in the end. And of course, St. Paul faced some pretty difficult circumstances. I think none of us have had that same kind of resistance that St. Paul had. But I think it's important for us to see that it's more about living our faith than it is about being cool in the eyes of the world, of being accepted in the eyes of the world. And I think also, God even wants us to be awkward. God wants us to be pushed beyond our limits. God wants us to kind of put ourselves out there. And I think that there's a couple times in Scripture when Jesus is even talking about our relationship with God. He even says that, you need to push yourself. You need to get outside. You need to do things that you feel are uncomfortable sometimes. And I think the first time he does this is in the story of the persistent widow. It's the widow that has been wronged by a judge. And so she goes to this corrupt, wicked judge every day, and she demands justice. And Jesus is, of course, speaking about prayer. He's speaking about persistence of prayer. But he's saying that we should be like this persistent widow. And think about this widow. She was a woman that went to the court every day. That she gave her plea every day. And then every day people made fun of her. Every day people saw her and thought, oh, not her again. That people judged her and they didn't think that she was doing something important. But yet she never gave up. She pushed beyond the awkwardness. And she, in one sense, was able to find favor with the judge because of her persistence. And Jesus even says, be like this with God. God is not a wicked judge, but annoy God. Push God, persist with God. Don't give up on God, because this is a way that we are changed and transformed. And also, I think there's also lots of awkward moments in the Scriptures, but I think of especially the moment when Jesus is talking again about prayer, and he says that, who among you would go to your neighbor in the middle of the night and ask for food because you have a guest coming in? That's pretty, imagine just going to your neighbor and asking them for food at midnight. Most of us, that'd be pretty awkward. That'd be pretty uncomfortable. And yet God is saying, when you do this with God, God opens the door. Knock and the door will be open. Seek and you will find. That God, in one sense, wants us to not be afraid to approach Him, to not be afraid of the awkwardness, not to be afraid of coming to Him with our needs. And of course, and this is pretty controversial, but I would even argue that Jesus was awkward. That Jesus had moments where he was awkward around other people. And of course, he was the teacher, he was God, he was the Son of God. But he had these moments where he put himself out there, he put himself out on a limb, and he was able to do remarkable things. And I think that there's no other, the best example of the willingness that God was willing to do was in John chapter 6. This is the chapter in the Gospel of John where he talks about the bread of life. And this is where Jesus even says, eat my body and drink my blood. He's teaching to the crowds, he's speaking to the people that are following him, and he's telling them something that's very difficult for them to understand. He's trying to teach them something about himself. And when he says this, when he talks about his body and his blood being poured out for them, what happens? But the crowds abandon him. They walk away from him because they can't understand, they can't accept what he's saying. And yet he still puts himself out there. He still embraces that moment because he knows it's necessary for them. It's necessary in his plan for salvation. And so I think that, we see that certainly in the example of the scriptures, this going beyond our boundaries, going beyond what we feel is comfortable, going beyond what we think is acceptable, all for the sake of Christ. And sometimes it will be awkward, it will be uncomfortable. And so the second reason why I think that being awkward is okay is that when we look at the saints, we find people who were incredibly awkward in their own lives. The saints were men and women that learned how to live with their faith exposed to the world. They were not ashamed to declare their belief, even if it made them uncomfortable, even if it made them an object of ridicule. And so the first saint that I think of when I think of this is St. Francis of Assisi. He's a pretty popular saint. As Dominican, St. Francis is kind of like an uncle. We're cousins, the Dominicans and Franciscans. And St. Francis was a man that was okay with being awkward. For those of you who know his story, he came from a very well-to-do family. He wasn't like in royalty or anything, but his family owned a factory where they would sell clothes. And so he grew up very wealthy, and he dressed very well. He was like an Abercrombie and Fitch model. I don't know, don't buy Abercrombie and Fitch. But St. Francis, when he did have that conversion moment, when he did have that moment where he turned his life to God, what was the first thing he did? But he took off his clothes. He actually literally stripped naked in the middle of a town because he realized that he was called to a life of poverty, a life of serving others. And so he wasn't afraid to literally get down to his birthday suit because it was a sign of his dependence on God. And after that, he became like a beggar, living on the streets, depending on other people. He wasn't afraid of what people would say about him. He wasn't afraid of that awkward moment when his friends would see him on the street, when his family would see him on the street. To him, it didn't matter because he had this relationship with God. And of course, St. Francis, as he continued to grow as a saint, he also never shied away from putting himself out there. One of my favorite things is in Assisi. Has anyone here been to Assisi? Alan, Chris? Assisi, it's a beautiful town, right? It's on this hill. It's a very beautiful medieval town. And outside Assisi, there's a friary. And in this friary, there is a courtyard that has a bushel of thorns. And the story goes that when St. Francis was alive, he was walking down the path one day and he had an impure thought. And he felt really guilty for this thought. And so what he did was he went to the thorn bush and he took off all his clothes again. I think he did that a lot in his life. He was kind of a streaker. He took off all his clothes and he literally rolled around in the thorn bush. And he cut himself on the thorns. And that thorn bush is still there today. And in fact, this bush doesn't have any thorns on it. That once Francis did that, God was like, okay, Francis, you're being a little too awkward for me. You need to tone it down a little bit. And he took the thorns away from the bush. But that was a moment where Francis was willing to just do what he thought he needed to do just for the sake of the gospel. And Francis even talked to birds. I'm sure it's okay to talk to dogs and cats. That's normal, but talking to birds, he would literally talk to birds. He would literally talk to the animal. He would talk to the moon. He would talk to the sun. He would talk to the world. And he, in one sense, received this great joy out of it because he saw in the world the beauty of God. He saw in the world the beauty of creation, and that moved him to not worry about what people thought of him, because he had this faith, this relationship with God. And so St. Francis might be the patron saint of awkward saints, but there are a few more too. The next saint that I think was comfortable with being awkward was St. Catherine of Siena. And does anyone know what order St. Catherine belonged to?
Carmelites?
Not Carmelite. What's like the best order ever? She was a Dominican. St. Catherine of Siena was a Dominican in Siena. And she was a girl that started at the age of 5 or 6. She started seeing Jesus. She would see him at church, she would see him at home, and she began to play with Jesus. She would like joke with Jesus and like bring him with her wherever she went. And at first as a kid, people thought, oh, that's pretty cute. But then as she got older, 13, 14, 15, she still would talk and see Jesus in her life. And I love that as she grew older, her parents wanted to marry her off to some family. They were done with Catherine because she was kind of a handful. And so, but she wanted to dedicate her life to Jesus. She wanted to be a bride of Christ. And so what she did was she cut off all of her hair so that all of the families, all of the men that were willing to court her would kind of be turned off by her because they thought, she's a little weird. Well, think Britney Spears in 2006, is it? 7? You know what I'm talking about, she cut off all of her hair. Al, you should know about Britney Spears.
Big Britney Spears?
Yeah. And so she was willing to kind of humble herself in this way. And then after no guy would marry her, she moved into her parents' attic. And she spent her life in time of contemplation and prayer. And then she would spend her time with God, and she would spend her time talking to God. And, imagine her family like talking about, oh yeah, Catherine's up in the attic. She's not working or anything, she's just kind of hanging out. It's kind of like, Nick looking for a job, just hanging out in your parents' attic. No, you probably don't live in your parents' attic. Yeah. Not the attic. But she wasn't afraid of it. You shouldn't be ashamed either, Nick. It's about doing what's right. And St. Catherine, eventually, she was called to leave the attic, like most of us are. And she was called to go and serve the poor of the streets. She was called to literally take care of those who were most in need, the most suffering. And she just literally, she was like Mother Teresa. She would go to the street corner and she'd pick people up and take care of them. But she was also very grossed out by this because she was kind of a sensitive person. And so what she started to do was that if she embraced someone that was poor, that she kind of was like disgusted by them, that she would make a point of kissing them on the cheek. That she would kiss them if they had like a sore, she'd kiss them on their sore. Or if they had leprosy, or if they had some kind of infection, she would literally kiss the area that they were inflicted by. And in this sense, she didn't care what people thought because she wanted to give her life and love these people in a complete way. That she didn't care about what people would say about this girl kissing homeless people all the time. And St. Catherine, as she grew up, she grew in this confidence that allowed her to speak to the world in a powerful way. And St. Catherine was known to write letters and visit people of influence. And she actually traveled to visit Pope Gregory XI. And during that time, the Pope was kind of being held ransom in Avignon. The French monarch had kind of hijacked the Pope and brought him to France. And so St. Catherine of Siena goes to visit Pope Gregory XI. She goes to tell him that, be a man, man up, and just don't be afraid of the French, come back to Rome. And so she was willing to throw herself out there. She was willing to be in that uncomfortable place of telling the Pope what to do. And she did this all from that relationship she had with God, from that relationship that she had through her faith. And the last saint that I could think of is actually St. Ignatius of Loyola. And I'm not just saying that because he's a Jesuit, because I'm a Dominican, we have kind of a rivalry going. But St. Ignatius was a man that was pretty awkward in his life. For those of you who don't know, his conversion story was very dramatic. He was a soldier, and he wanted to be like a hero soldier. He wanted to be a romantic. He wanted to sweep women off their feet and go and win battles. But in his first battle, he was injured in the leg, and he was bedridden for like months and months. And while he was bedridden, he started to think about his life. He started to think about what he wanted in life. And he basically left the hospital with this great desire to be a saint. And he had a great zeal. He had lots of zeal to be a saint, but he didn't have a lot of wisdom to go with it. And I love that, especially in his early life, he basically just left the hospital and he's like, okay, I'm going to be a saint today. And he would like go and look for ways to be saints. Like he wanted to just like get it over with in a day. And one of my favorite stories is he was traveling one day on a donkey, and someone else came up next to him who was on a horse, and they began to talk as they were traveling. And during the conversation, this other guy on the horse, he made a joke, and he made fun of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And then after he made that joke, he kind of walked off down like on left on a street. And St. Ignatius didn't know what to do, and he thought to himself, he's like, I should kill this man. But he's like, wait a minute, do saints kill people? Wait, I don't know, like he was like confused. And so he's like, okay, I'll let the donkey decide. And he decided that if the donkey follows this man down the path, he's going to follow him and kill him. Or if the donkey goes the other way, he's just going to drop it altogether. And luckily the donkey had a lot of common sense and it went the other way. I mean, if he had followed the man, who knows, he'd probably be in prison and we wouldn't have Jesuits today. Which, I don't know, would that be a bad? No, that would be a bad thing. And then I also love, St. Ignatius, he grew in wisdom, he grew in knowledge, and he wanted to become a priest. But to become a priest, he had to know how to read and write in Latin. And his Latin skills were terrible. Like, he couldn't read anything in Latin. And so to learn, he enrolled himself in basically like a grade school for little boys. And he sat in the classroom with all these little kids, these middle schoolers, and they made fun of him the entire time. They called him stupid, they made fun of like how he pronounced words and everything, and they made fun of how slow he was. But he didn't care, because he wanted to be this priest. He had this calling. And he didn't let it, the other kids, make fun of him. He was kind of like the Billy Madison. Do you guys know that movie? Okay. And then finally, St. Francis, or St. Ignatius rather, even in seminary, he was kind of awkward. And he was roomed with a man named Francis Xavier, and he saw a lot of potential in Francis Xavier. See, Francis Xavier was like a jock. He was like this cool guy that everyone wanted to hang out with, and he was probably going to be like a bishop or something, because he was really intelligent and really skilled and really handsome and everything. And St. Ignatius was like, if I get him to join my order, I'll have tons of other guys join. And so every night, because they shared a room, and every night when they went to bed, St. Ignatius would say, what good is it to gain the whole world but to forfeit your life? And he did this every single night. Every single night for like a year. When they went to bed, he would say that to St. Francis Xavier. And eventually St. Francis Xavier gave up and he joined the Society of Jesus. And he became a missionary. He was the first priest to go to Japan. He went to India as well. He was going to go to China, but they kicked him out and he died on the ocean. But he was still a saint. And so these saints, there's many more awkward saints. There's many more men and women that have already lived their faith, that have experienced these awkward moments. But I'm sure you probably have your favorite ones as well. And then the third real reason why I think that these awkward moments are secretly cool is that they're moments that bring us joy. They're these awkward moments where we find ourselves being embarrassed, or we genuflect in the movie theater, or we, like we're praying, for our meal, and that's when the waiter comes back to ask us if we need anything else. Those are the moments that, even though they're kind of embarrassing in the moment, they bring joy to us. And so how do they bring joy? Well, I think the first way is that they humble us. These moments are humbling. They're not, boosting our egos at all. They're moments where we get embarrassed. And I think that that's, in one sense, a way of building down our pride, our egos. And that humility is something that's so precious, because when we grow in humility, it allows us to be able to grow in our love for other people. It allows us to grow in our love for God. Because when we're humble, it shows us that we do need help. That we do need people to help us out. That we do need people to rely upon. St. Thomas Aquinas, he says that true humility consists in not presuming on our own strength, but learning how to trust the strength of God. I think that humility is something that when we start to practice it, when we start to live it, when we become more humble in our life, it allows us to trust more in God. It forces us to trust more in God. I think that once we experience that awkwardness, once that humbles us, it also allows us to experience the love of God. And it's the love of God that produces the fruit of joy in our life. And I think that also these awkward moments bring us joy because they're evangelical in their nature. They're evangelical in the sense that they're witnessing our lives as Catholics to the world. That these awkward moments, when we wear ashes on our forehead, they speak to people in a powerful way. They share this importance, this fact that there is something deeper in life with other people. I think that's why, Ash Wednesday is like the most popular day of the year for not just Catholics, for everyone. Because everyone wants dirt on their face. Everyone is called, I think, to something deeper, and they want to have that deeper truth. And they're evangelical in the sense that they also force us to share our faith with other people. When we go to lunch with our co-workers on Friday during Lent and we can't eat meat, it forces us to explain what we're doing. It forces us to show that there's a deeper reality to our lives. That when we are, in one sense, put in those awkward places, it forces us to say something. It forces us to do something. And in a more powerful way, they show the world that there's something that we hold on to. And I think that attracts other people. And then finally, I think that these awkward moments bring us joy. Well, I should say, and the reason why when we share our faith, we experience joy is because it's in giving on our faith. It's by sharing our faith that we produce joy. It's because by sharing our faith, we're sharing, and in one sense, loving other people in a deeper way. And again, that love is what produces the joy of our faith, the joy of our Christian lives. And then also, I think that these awkward moments are just funny. That's these moments that we hold on to, that we tell over and over again, that they're kind of like battle scars that we wear on ourselves. That, we can talk about these moments where we were uncomfortable. We talk about these moments where we were embarrassed. We talk about these moments that have humbled us. And they, in one sense, bring joy. They bring this sense of humor to bear. Because I think ultimately God is the one that has the greatest sense. God is the one that made us. God is the one that created the universe, and I think that God rejoices in this joy. He rejoices in these moments, and He, in one sense, He made the walrus. That's like the most awkward creature ever, and I think that that's just something that allows us to smile, allows us to laugh, and allows us to grow more deeper in our faith. Now, I think that at this point, I have some time left, and I think there's time for discussion, right? But so if you have questions for me, that's fine. I'd love to answer them. But also, I'd love to hear, what are your most awkward moments? What are your favorite awkward Catholic moments? And, if you want to share, please do. If you don't want to share, please share. If you don't, I have lots of more awkward moments, too, that I can share from, not my life. I'm actually not that awkward, as you can tell. But I have lots of stories of other people that have been awkward, so, yeah. So are there any questions or awkward stories you want to share with everyone?
I'm not smoking. I don't know.
Or you can tell other people's awkward stories too.
It's always slightly awkward when there's a wedding and either the bride is Catholic or the groom is Catholic and the other side is not. So you have a wedding in a Catholic church, but it's not necessarily a mass. So half of the congregation is kind of, do we sit or stand? Do we respond here? What do we do? You can tell they're confused. So I went through that last year with my sister.
Oh yeah.
So it wasn't bad, but a little bit awkward. Just a little bit.
Yeah. No, those are always, and you also see with the new mass, the new responses for mass. When people who haven't been Catholic for a long time, they come back and they don't know any of the responses. That's always the fun awkwardness. Even when we slip into it too. One of my favorite awkward priest stories is there's a Dominican priest, and he's both Roman Catholic and Ukrainian Rite. So he can celebrate Mass in the Ukrainian Rite and the Roman Catholic Church. And so he was doing a parish mission one time, and the pastor of this parish was not a native English speaker. And he had a good knowledge of the language, but he still kind of mixed up some words. And so he was introducing this Dominican, and he says, "Oh, here we have Father Jim, who's a Dominican priest, and he's a bisexual priest." and everyone looks at him, and they're like, "Is he?" And then he's like, "I'm bi-ritual."
Chris, you have a story.
I've actually been to a Baptist wedding where half the family is Catholic. So when they do the communion, I guess, the groom's side of the family all went up to go to communion. All the Catholics are just sitting politely in the pews, so full half the church is just hanging out.
Yeah, that's it. Because especially when it's, the weddings are the worst. Because it's like, people that would never come to a church or a Catholic church in their entire lives, all of a sudden are in this space that they don't know anything about. Yeah.
So in middle school, people that went along that middle school wrestling team came to a funeral at our church for one of their friends whose parents had passed away. And, they didn't ask me ahead of time, is there anything we should know about your church? So they go up for communion, they take the body, and then my first friend goes to take the cup, he takes it, and just takes a big gulp of it. The look on his face, and he knows it's actually wine. The reaction he's having to it. And he goes back and says, "What was that?" I'm like, "What was wine?" He's like, "That was wine, not fruit juice." I'm like, "What do you guys use for your church? Like, shouldn't you have been prepared?" So that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Not awkward for Catholics, but awkward for him. So.
I remember, when I was a little kid, I remember one time my friends brought me to a different church, and they had little cups they passed around. And it was little small ones, and I'm like, "What is this for?" Drink, dummy.
I had a first date one time at a steakhouse where I went to college, and it's one of the nicest steakhouses in town. And it was Friday, and I was just like, and I sat there, and he's like, "Are you gonna get steak?" And I'm like, "I'm Catholic, and it's Friday in Flint." And he was like, "Oh no," and then he felt bad, and I was like, "I'm gonna get a steak." I broke Lent, but it was so good. It was worth it.
I can't endorse that, but I understand.
Yeah, it was worth it, but let's get passion for the next day. I ate steak yesterday. It was at Stables, and the priest was like, "Oh, that place is good." So it was funny.
Yeah. No, I think that a few years ago, St. Patrick's Day fell on a Friday, and you have to have your corned beef and cabbage on St. Patrick's Day, and that's you're not really Irish if you don't have that. So I remember there was a big deal, I think in Chicago even, where the cardinal refused to absolve or to kind of lessen the fasting on that day, and people got really upset. Actually, corned beef and cabbage isn't that great, really. It's more just you eat it just because it's...
That's an obligation.
It is an obligation. Yeah, exactly. And one of my favorite stories too is about a priest, and he was a deacon at the time, and he was like a brand new deacon, a month old, and he was at this parish in California, and it was kind of a really charismatic parish. And before Mass, the priest says, "Now at this parish, when people come up for communion, if the woman is pregnant, you bless their baby." And so he's like, "Oh, that's cool." And so during communion, this woman comes up, and he blesses her stomach, and she just looks at him, and then she kind of walks away. And then after Mass, her brother comes up to this Dominican. He says "Did you see something in my sister?" And he's like, "Why? Because she's not pregnant, but you blessed her belly. Is she pregnant? Is it an immaculate conception, or is it a virgin birth?" And he's like, "Sorry, I screwed up." So you never assume unless they tell you.
Clear baby.
Bitch jumping.
Kelsey, it wasn't that funny.
Well, I love the fact that she thought that like he like was charismatic and like saw she's pregnant. Like that was like the first thought. Go ahead, go ahead.
So, working with teens, I work with a lot of awkwardness in my life. My favorite, though, is St. B's teens are very different because they don't know when to kneel at Mass at other places because we stand and kneel at different times.
Yeah.
And when we were at St. Paul's or anywhere else we go for Mass, they always stand as a group and then look around and awkwardly go back there. Especially St. Agnes, they know to expect it. The sister there is like, remember, we kneel at the right time. I know.
I became Catholic in the last few years, and so we invited my parents to the vigil.
Yeah.
And we warned them that it was a long service, but at one point I saw my father completely stretched out with his shoes off, kind of reclining on the pew. And I was worried that he wasn't going to make it through the rest of the vigil.
They should just put like a nap room in every church. So
Yeah.
give them the time to take a nap and then come back out.
Repurpose their cry room for vigil service.
Exactly, yeah. Well, I always love too, like, again, as a priest, there's a lot of, powerful moments, but like, for like first confession, so for like little kids, their first confession, I remember like one time, what I usually do is when I'm giving absolution, I like raise my hand and kind of like extend it over them, and like half the time the kids like, they're like, they like do it too, like, do I do this too? Like, so, I think one of these days I'll be like, live long and do not sin.
The best when you have a friend who's not Catholic coming to your church who has the baptismal font and she's like, why do you have a fountain? What do you do? Jacuzzis.
Sarah?
Yeah, it was when I was in third grade, so I was new to the whole Eucharist thing. It was at brother's wedding, and I was a church bridesmaid, and so was my sister-in-law's cousin. And I was I didn't really realize that we were supposed to go up to communion. And so we're in the very front pew, and communion comes, and she's in front of me, and I'm like, go. And she's like, what? So she's up there, and she has no idea what she's doing because no one else. She's the very first person to go. And she's like, she ended up taking communion, and my mom's like, hey, I was supposed to do that. I don't understand.
They were actually one of my more recent, really awkward experiences. I do want more familiar things.
Down there.
It's kind of good.
Actually, one of my, and this is, it was really kind of awkward because I do a lot of masses at nursing homes, like during the week. And I remember it was like the Friday before Ash Wednesday. And this old couple comes up to me, and they're like in their 80s. And the wife comes up to me, and she says like, now Ash Wednesday is my husband's birthday, so do we have to worry about the abstaining? And I'm like, no, you're too old to worry about fasting. I mean, you're beyond the age of fasting, so you can, have a nice dinner and don't worry about it. She said, no, I mean, do we have to abstain from sex on his birthday? I was like, I don't care. I don't think God even cares. Yeah. You can still do it at that age. Any last stories or? Well, I encourage you at your table to share if you didn't your awkward experiences, and maybe we'll make some new ones. Just don't be like St. Francis. Everyone keep their clothes.